Hello, YouTube. Here we are on July 1st, Canada Day. Although I may not post this till tomorrow, so it could be July 2nd by the time you've seen this. I'm still not decided what I'm going to do. But here we are, beginning of July, to do June's comics. Usually I'm a little earlier than this, midway through the month, but I've kind of got out of sync the last couple months, and here we are. Anyways, June's issues brought some cool stuff. We got a handful of books to go through, and a couple of new sub-series. No, just one new sub-series, which was a really good one. But we're going to start with a single issue from the Void Rivals franchise, and this is issue number 9. Now, in this issue, we see Derek and Salila still making their way across that kind of wasteland with that after their battle with Proximus or whatever his name was. And in that battle with him, Salila got impaled by some sort of metal rod. So Derek, she's able to extricate herself from this thing, and her and Derek take off again through this wasteland, but she's in bad shape, obviously. So they make it to some sort of base or fortification or something like that that's been all run down, and I think it was Silas has been like, oh, I've been here before, whatever, blah blah blah, and they make their way into it, and we can just see this yellow and green object kind of sticking out of the dirt, and all of a sudden it transforms, and it's Springer, the triple changer. He's surprised that Derek is not intimidated by this giant transforming robot, right? So they begin talking, and he explains the situation, whatever. Salila's about to die. We're organics, so he can't help us. And yeah, that's our situation. And then all of a sudden, though, before they can really do anything, decide on what to do, Proximus catches up, and he starts fighting Springer. And he actually holds his own for a little tiny humanoid creature. He holds his own against this giant robot, right? So they're battling basically for the rest of the issue. And at a couple points during the issue, once kind of near the start and then near the end, we have a couple of cutscenes. The first one near the front of the book is Skuxoid. He's kind of like the walking pig man that looks like he's made of stone or something. He's from the Transformers universe. He was in the cartoon, and we've seen him earlier in some of the other issues about this Zertonian alloy that he's found and he's been trying to sell or whatever. And I forget who he dumped it off on, but we see him come home to his apartment or house on whatever planet he's from. And he's like, hey, everybody, I'm home. And then he's like, oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot. So obviously he has no family left or something's happened. So we see him kind of just sitting down all miserable in his abode. And the cutscene at the end that kind of concludes the book is the Quintessons actually on Quintessa. The judges, I guess they're called, are talking to one of the more alligator looking ones, and they're like, what's going on? You have news. And he's like, yes, this pigman, this Skuxoid, has this Zertonian alloy that harkens back to roots in ancient Cybertron, and then he mentions a name called Zerta Trion. You know how the Transformers, they had like Alpha Trion. I think those were some sort of Transformer names, the Trion part. So he mentions a Zerta Trion, which I'm assuming the Zerta has something to do with Solila's home planet of Zertonia, and obviously Trion. So there's some sort of link between the ancient Transformers and this planet Zertonia and what's going on. But after this one Quintesson mentions the name Zerta Trion, right as the book ends, the other Quintessons basically destroy him, and they're saying, you don't mention that name. So the Zerta Trion name means a little more than we think. It ended in violence because he said it. So can't wait to see where these ancient roots lead us back to. So hopefully that's coming up in issue number 10. Now for the TMT, and here we have a few issues. The first one being issue 13 of the ongoing Saturday Morning Adventures series. This one picks up where the last I can't even talk. where the last one left off. The Turtles had just defeated, they'd been taken captive by Og again, and they just defeated that dragon for the first of 3 challenges. And the second challenge is what this issue is all about. The 4 turtles have to square off against 5 turtles, different versions of themselves, plus Jenica, and each of the turtles comes from a different version of the Turtles. Like there's one from the most recent cartoon, The Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There's an OG one from the black and white comics. Then there's one from the IDW comics. Then there's one from the 2010 or 12 Nickelodeon cartoon. Like they're all different versions amongst these turtles. So basically they square off against each other. Michelangelo kind of, they're like, well, he didn't say we had to like fight within a certain time frame, so let's go get pizza, right? So they go hang out together. Donnie and Donnie are fighting, but it's kind of half-assed, and they're kind of talking things out. Leo and Jenica are fighting, and then Raph eventually sneaks up on, or Raph's fighting Leo, and then the Raph from the enemy turtles comes in and gets the drop on the Michelangelos, and eventually Raph knocks the Michelangelo out. So Og is like, oh, you guys win. So now we're tied at 1-1, right? So they beat the dragon, but then they lost to the turtles. So they're at 1-1. There's one more contest to go. And Og presents to the turtles that I'm going to do what I did back in the very first, I think it was the first issue of this series. He said, I'm going to run up against you guys, every villain you've ever squared off against. And on the last page of this issue, we see like the 4 turtles surrounded by like everybody, like Shredder, Rock Soldiers, blah, 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 like everybody's there. So they've got this massive horde of people who hate them and want revenge on them closing in on them, right? So their third challenge is going to be by far the trickiest of the bunch. So hopefully we will see that in issue 14 and it will all be wrapped up. Next up, another Saturday Morning Adventures issue, but it's a one-off, and it's an Usagi Yojimbo one. So Usagi Yojimbo in this issue starts off, he's in New York City, he's out on patrol, and he sees a bunch of robbers dressed up as the turtles robbing a place, and he stops them. Then the turtles, the real turtles, catch up to Usagi and says like, and Usagi's all excited, my friends, whatever, and they're like, we got good news for you, bro. It's like, Donnie built a machine that can take you back to your home. So he's like, yes. So they go back to, is it feudal Japan where he's from? I can't remember if he's just from a different continent or if he's also from a different time. I can't remember. But anyways, they go back to his home and they traipse over to his village, but nobody's there. There's one guy left. And he's like, yeah, these shadow warriors came and took everybody captive. He says, I'm the only one left. I've been able to avoid capture or whatever. And soon enough, these shadow warriors get the drop on them and they have to fight them off. And we learn that the villain behind this whole scheme is this guy called Lord Desmodus, and he is, I forget what kind of creature he is, but there's 2 mutants in, I think that showed up in the original like 1987 Turtles cartoon and comic book series. There's 2 guys, Wingnut and Screwloose. Wingnut, I think, is the bigger guy, and he's some sort of flying, I don't know if he's a mosquito or something, but some sort of big flying creature with a pointy nose. And that's what this Lord Desmodus guy is. He's the same type of species as Wingnut. And his shadow warriors are all of his minions. So he ends up duping the turtles and tricking them into giving him, getting the drop on them in the woods, and actually takes them captive. So the turtles and Usagi are then trapped in Desmodus's castle, but they engineer an escape and whatever, and chase him away, and he blasts off in some sort of ship, and his base self-destructs right as the issue kind of comes to a close, and Usagi's reunited with all of his friends from the village and everything. So all's well that ends well. God, I hate it when I can't talk. Anyways, next up, this one is called, what the hell was this one called? A TMNT special event, prelude to TMNT number 1. So if you remember of the regular ongoing Turtles series, we just last time did issue 150 where the whole storyline closed off. So this is a preview to where they're going to be starting over for a new storyline coming up. There you go. That's the cover of the prelude. So it starts with a brief little story about Donatello. He's some guy is in the deep. It just says the deep South, United States, and he goes to this facility where he wants to square off against the nastiest creature you've got in here. And the guys are like, okay, that's this one. So they basically have all these mutants caged up, and they sell these hunting safaris for these mutants, for humans to come in and fight them. And so lo and behold, the most dangerous mutant that comes out of a cage is Donatello. So he ends up beating the shit out of this guy, and then beating out of the shit of his captors, but they eventually get the drop on him and tase him and put him back into his cage. But once he's back in the cage, he's all smiling, and his friends in the other cells are like, Donnie, what, you almost escaped. Oh, it's too bad, and whatever, and maybe next time. And he's like, yeah, maybe next time, but I got what I wanted. And all he wanted to do was, because they're in captivity and they're not treated well, like, the guards had like a sandwich on their desk or whatever, so all he did was cause a ruckus so he could steal that sandwich while he was taking the beatings and being thrown back in his cage. And he, disperses the parts of the sandwich to all of his friends that are in captivity, sort of thing. And then the rest of the issue picks up, and that's where we really start off, and it's basically called Monster Island. So old Hob and his mutanimal friends are on this island, and this scientist Lindsay something is experimenting in their headquarters on some mutagen and stuff. And a guy from the EPF, the Earth Protection Force, who has a grudge with old Hob because of past events, is keeping tabs on this island from the far shore, across the river or whatever it is. And he eventually decides to infiltrate the island and get the drop on old Hob. But the only thing is, this Lindsay has been experimenting on herself with this mutagen, and a bad thing ends up happening. She ends up turning herself into this like spider creature and starts taking all the mutanimals like hostage and stringing them up in webs and stuff like that. I don't know if they're dead or not, but they definitely look like they're dead. And so this agent from EPF is coming after Hob, but they end up meeting up, and Hob's like, you know what? I'm sorry. Whatever, what happened. I'm sorry. Whatever. It was something to do with the guy's wife or something. And he's like, we got a bigger problem right here. Like, you see these things strung up by the spider thing, whatever. We got bigger fish to fry. And then that's when this Lindsay in her spider mutant form attacks, and they end up fighting her off together, and kind of saving the day. And then the hatchet is kind of buried and stuff. And at the end of the issue, a bunch of mutanimals end up showing up and being like, Hob, we're back, whatever. So it's all kind of a happy ending. And along the way, we see a couple of cutscenes as well. What's happening in Mutant Town. Sally Pride is talking with the EPF about where they go with Mutant Town, how they make things better, how they approach, doing that. And then we also see Angel checking in on Jenica, who is playing a gig with her band or whatever. And so everything in Mutant Town's apparently going well. But and now that this Monster Island issue is solved, everybody seems to be in a better place for the time being, because this is a prelude to TMNT #1. So there's going to be a problem coming from somewhere. Somehow, some villain's going to cause a ruckus. We just don't know who it is yet, and the nature of the ruckus. So we'll find out in about 2-3 weeks' time. All right, normally we're pretty Transformers heavy, but or at least I guess that's been drying up now that things have moved over to Image. But back in the day, it used to be the Transformers series plus at least a couple sub-series going on at the same time. But yeah, the Transformers is kind of more limited now, because there's been nothing else really coming out of it in terms of sub-series. But this was a good issue, and it is issue number 9. So last time we left off, Soundwave had just contacted, the Decepticons had reached the Nemesis, which was under the water in some lake or ocean or whatever, and he'd contacted Shockwave to try and get some help. So Shockwave is talking to them. He's like, oh, my loyal minions, yes, let's do this. Let's cause some ruckus on Earth. Meanwhile, the Autobots, Jetfire is flying a number of them to this disturbance the Decepticons are creating. And what ends up happening is this big vortex is created around the Nemesis, and all the water kind of like, it creates a big cylinder where all the water is kind of around, and it's kind of dry land. Everything's dry down to the Nemesis. So the Autobots fly in, they get shot down, and then a big battle ensues with Shockwave coming through this portal that's at the heart of this this underwater cyclone or whatever it is that's causing this dry spot in the middle of the ocean. And he gets in on the action, and he starts engaging Optimus Prime, and he really wants to destroy Optimus Prime. So this battle is unfolding. In the meantime, we see Carly driving with RC and Wheeljack and talking about what's going on, and they come into a roadblock with some of her father's and Spike Father's friends, and they're like, fucking the enemy, these robots. And Carly's like, guys, whoa, there's good ones, there's bad ones. These are the good ones. So we're not sure, and that's kind of all we really see. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but I'm glad to see Wheeljack in the action because he's one of my favorites. And then the other bit of action we see is Spike, who's still at the hospital. Astrotrain, after, was it Soundwave that freed him from captivity an issue or two ago? Yeah, I think it was him. Astrotrain shows up at the hospital, and he's on a hunt for Megatron. He wants Megatron's ass, but for some reason he shows up at the hospital and he's looking for Spike. And Astrotrain's like, I don't care what I have to do to get him, so I'll destroy all of you. I just need this little spiky-haired human. And so Spike is like, bro, I'll come willingly. Just leave everybody alone, whatever. So I'm not sure why Astrotrain wants Spike, to be quite honest, but he ends up throwing him inside of him and converting to space shuttle mode and blasting off into the sky. And right as the issue's ending, we see something weird attached to the bottom of Astrotrain, and then he eventually gets all bleh, and he crash lands, or he doesn't actually crash land yet, but as the issue's ending, we see he's about to, and we see the person or robot that interrupted Astrotrain's flight appear and try and save Spike, and it's somebody unexpected. I was not expecting this Transformer to show up at all. Beachcomber, the little dune buggy, the peaceful, geology-loving dune buggy Beachcomber. So I thought that was a really interesting add to the story, was to throw in a character like him, because he's not a rare, like, seldom used Transformer, but he is a little more off the board in terms of who you think would show up in the story and pull a move like this sort of thing. So I can't wait to see where that's going, because I was always a little fond of Beachcomber and his peaceful ways and his kind of chill vibe. So can't wait to see where this goes. Last up, as per the usual, G.I. Joe. There is a new sub-series going on. This is the new sub-series I was talking about. The cover's a little weird. I picked a weird one because it was kind of cool. It's black and white. It's got a whole shitload of characters on it from G.I. Joe, Transformers. It is Scarlet, issue number 1. So, this issue is obviously based around one of the original G.I. Joe characters, Scarlet. Shayna O'Hara is her real name. And as it opens, we see her kind of in Monaco, underwater, with her eyes peeking out of the surface, sneaking up on some sort of function that's going on. She exits the water, takes her clothes off, gets into a dress, and then makes her way into this fancy place where something's obviously going on. And she's on her earpiece the whole time, back to headquarters, being like, okay, we thought the people we were after weren't going to be here, but they are. So do I have permission to engage? And they're like, no, just recon, just intel, do not engage. And she's obviously not happy about it. And what is happening here is there's an auction for human trafficking. So there's all these girls in bikinis, and there's buyers there. And she was just supposed to go identify the buyers, figure out who they were so they could go after them later. But she's like, I think I'm gonna do things myself here. And she also notices Jinx. Now, Jinx was a Jedi, crossing the streams here, a ninja who was with the G.I. Joe team in the original cartoon. And here there's obviously something going on, though, because Scarlet's like, oh, what's Jinx doing here? Like, oh, I shouldn't, like, this is weird. And so soon enough, the shit hits the fan even without Scarlet initiating it. So she just jumps in, she offs all the bad guys, she frees all the girls, and asks for exfiltration. But when she gets back to headquarters, whoever her commanding officer is like, "You're fired," and he gave her the Vince McMahon. He did. "You're fired," and she's like, "Oh well, fuck you," right? Like, so she goes home, and when she gets home, something's off, and Stalker is waiting for her inside her house. And he starts talking to her about what's going on, and she starts waxing on past events. And so apparently her and Jinx used to be roommates and best friends and whatever, did everything together, blah, blah, blah. And so Stalker informs her that, yeah, well, the reason she's missing is that she's gone undercover to infiltrate the Arashikage clan. So if you don't know who that is, that's a ninja clan, and that's where Storm Shadow was based out of. So whenever you see Storm Shadow, he has these red tattoos in a square with these lines, and I think Snake Eyes had him too, because he was also there initially. So Jinx has infiltrated the Arashikage, but we don't know why, and so they're doing all these flashbacks, and then it flashes forward to the present time, and her and Snowjob are on a mission. He drops her in the snowy tundra, and she makes her way towards the headquarters of this clan. And once she offs everybody and makes her way to the I don't know, I guess the audience chamber, whatever, wherever their leaders are, where Jinx is as well, she's like, "I offer you a deal. I offer you myself." And he's like, well, the guy that leads the clan is like, "Well, I'm not aware that I needed you, right?" And then all of a sudden, as the issue closes off, we see Scarlet get knocked out, and Storm Shadow had snuck up on her from behind and knocked her out. So we don't know what's gonna happen to her. Like, I don't know if she was just going to try and pull Jinx out of there, if that was her scheme. But obviously she's gonna be in a bit of trouble when she wakes up. We'll just have to see what kind of trouble in issue number 2 next month. So I love all these sub-series with these classic characters. They're really cool. But my favorite one so far is the one I'm about to talk about now. I have issues number 4 and 5 of the Cobra Commander sub-series. Now, in these 2 issues, we see Cobra Commander with the Dreadnought Ripper. Cobra Commander gets Ripper to show him where the Dreadnoughts are keeping this power source that they've been using. And so when they go into this underground facility, there's this old doctor that the Ripper, the Dreadnoughts have been keeping captive and having work on their energy source. The energy source is Energon. That's what they're doing. That's what they're using to power their weapons, I think, and stuff like that. And they're also selling it to outside parties, right? So in the process of talking to this doctor, he's like, "Yeah, I've been working on the Energon. Like, I found a way to make it even better by diluting it, so we can get more bang for the buck. We can make our Energon, go farther." So Cobra Commander's like, "Excellent." So then he basically takes over, and he's like, "This is mine now, so I'm gonna leave." And he takes Ripper with him, and but when he climbs out of this facility, his winged, freakish bodyguard Nemesis is waiting for him, and Cobra Commander's like, "Got what we came for, let's go." And Nemesis is like, "No, you fulfilled your task. Now it's time for you to die. We never trusted you in Cobra Law, and yeah, your use has been fulfilled, and now we got to get rid of you because you're a liability. You're a wild card. You never were one to who was for the best of Cobra Law. You were out for yourself," sort of thing, right? So they get into this big fight, and Nemesis is almost indestructible, so Cobra Commander's getting the shit kicked out of him until he plays his ace in the hole, because he was somewhat prepared for this, and he ends up taking the piss on Nemesis and then escaping. And so before the first issue, number 4 ends, he gets out of Ripper. He's like, "Who are your buyers for this stuff? Who were you selling this Energon to?" And Ripper says, "Destro." So Destro's coming into the fold. So when issue number 5 kicks off, we see a quick cutscene of a bunch of Mars facilities, which is Destro's arms company, around the world get attacked and significantly damaged and whatever. So Destro's like, what the fuck is going on, right? Like, what is happening? So then somebody brings Ripper in. He's been taken captive. He has a message for Destro, and he's like, yeah, this guy, he's crazy, but he wants to meet with you. He's got this energy source. He thinks, you know, you guys could be partners or whatever, but Ripper's like, but he is fucking crazy. So just to warn you, batshit crazy. So Destro takes the bait and he's like, yeah, we'll meet with them. So I think it must be Springfield that they go to before it was really Springfield, like Cobra's Springfield. And so Destro and his goons are kind of, they show up for the meeting in the street, and all of a sudden a bunch of his goons get sniped, and Cobra Commander's like, what are you gonna do, right? But he's like, have I got a proposition for you? And Destro's like, what the fuck, like, you just killed all my guys. And but then Cobra Commander starts talking about this energy source, the Energon, and what it means, and he's like, you know, we could be good partners. I got the energy source, you make the weapons, put them together, meh, what can happen, right? All sorts of good shit for us. Nothing for the good of the world. Drop that. And so Destro's like, okay. Then they shake hands, and so basically Cobra is born right here, right? And so that's the last thing we see is Cobra Commander in some sort of audience chamber with all of his minions and I guess now Destro's forces and stuff too. And he basically unravels this big tapestry with the Cobra logo on it, and he's like, we are Cobra, and that's how the issue ends. So this is kind of like a lot of these sub series, like with Duke and Scarlet and Cobra Commander, they're all around the origins of Cobra, the origins of G.I. Joe, how the team came together, how the villains came together, that sort of thing. So it's kind of neat to see, you know, this version of how everything in G.I. Joe began, and how all of the characters kind of sometimes intermingled and stuff like that. So I'm really enjoying these G.I. Joe sub-series. Cobra Commander so far has been my favorite because he is such a neat character. But the only person who might surpass the Cobra Commander sub-series is if they have a Snake Eyes one. Now, Snake Eyes has been done to death. They always have Snake Eyes stuff because the guy's universally loved as one of the coolest G.I. Joe characters, let alone even outside of G.I. Joe. Like, everybody knows Snake Eyes, like, he's amazing. He's the only one who might surpass Cobra Commander in terms of who I'd like to see in a sub-series. But there's lots of guys and girls I'd like to see, but it's hard to beat that weasel Cobra Commander. What a fucking weasel. Anyways, until July, well, sorry, until later in July or early August, depending on if I get my ass in gear or not. We'll see what happens. Meow.